Our candidates are, to the right, incumbent Senator Overbey and challenger Scott Hughes. I'll ask the first question. One of the issues in this race seems to be the definition of conservative. I'd like each of you to define what you think a conservative is and how that matches your own philosophy. We'll start with Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Stan. Are we on? Can everybody hear me? There we go. Thank you, Stan. Thank you for having this forum tonight. You are correct. From early on in this race, it seems to be the candidate that can prove themselves to be the most conservative is the candidate who will probably at the end of the day garner the most votes here in Sevier County and in Blount County. So what do I think conservative is? I think someone is conservative not just if they say they're conservative. I think they have to talk the talk, but they must also walk the walk. And I think conservative issues are on both sides of the coin. We're on the fiscal side of the coin, and we're also on the social side of the coin. The reality is that here in Sevier County and in Blount County just across the way, we live in two of the most conservative counties in the whole state. And those are counties that are God-fearing people. We're pro-Second Amendment people. We're pro-family people. We're pro-education people. But you know, we're also small government and high personal responsibility people. Those are the things that make a conservative a conservative. And I really think that we have to focus on this election and the other ones that have been up here, not just on a bunch of rhetoric on what's been said, but we have to look at past voting records. And we got to talk it, yes, but it's really important that we must walk the walk.
Thank you, Stan, and thank you, panelists, for having this forum and your thoughtful approach to this year's election cycle. I was born and raised here in East Tennessee by conservative parents. By a father who worked 44 years of shift work, fought in World War II on board ship and in Korea aboard ship, who graduated from high school by a mother who didn't graduate from high school but got her GED while I was in high school. They lived and worked their conservative values. And they didn't talk a lot about them because they didn't have to. They lived them out. And they expected my brother and me to do the same thing. And those were the conservative East Tennessee values that I was raised on, that we respect the taxpayer dollar jealously. We guard the taxpayer dollar in budgeting and in government. Secondly, we don't expect government to do everything or to be the answer to all of our problems. Too often it's not the answer to all of our problems. Take, for example, Obamacare. We shouldn't expect government to be the answer for all of our problems, and a true conservative looks for personal responsibility. Finally, a true conservative wants to use government where it can and must act, like to get drunken drivers off the road, like to take care and serve our veterans who served this country, and finally to protect the unborn, the newborn, and those born with disabilities.
If I can ask a follow-up, the Republican Party clearly is the conservative party, but it's also the party that nominated Mitt Romney for president when he was not the most conservative candidate, and it's the party that elected Bill Haslam governor when he was not the most conservative Republican running. Isn't there a big enough tent in the conservative party, the conservative wing of the party, for everyone? Senator?
Well, you look across this great state of ours and you look, Tennessee has long been a conservative state, even before Republicans took control of our two U.S. senators, our governor, and now taking control of the House and the Senate. Yes, our party is a big enough party. You know, it's not that we all have to be singing the same part in the hymn. Hymns usually have four parts: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, and we can harmonize by bringing various folks together singing the conservative song.
Mr. Hughes.
I believe there is part, in the Republican Party, there is a big tent. And I believe that there is parts of this state, for example, geographically, that there are more conservatives in that part of the tent, the Republican Party. You are correct that the state of Tennessee and the United States was a Romney state. But Blount County and Sevier County did not vote for Romney in the primary. It voted for Rick Santorum. We are in 2 counties in this state that are conservative counties. And the reason they are is because we are God-fearing people who were raised with those conservative values. So is there room in the Republican Party for conservative and a little bit moderate? Of course there is. But in Blount and Sevier County, where we are right here, we are conservative. Therefore, we must demand that our representation in Nashville hold our conservative values.
The next question will come from Greg Johnson.
We do live in a conservative state, and in the conservative part of that state. But the Tennessee Education Association Political Action Committee in 2011 contributed $34,750 to political candidates and committees. 95% of that went to Democrats. There were $1,750 that went to Republicans. 3 Republicans got contributions. And so my question is kind of twofold. Would you accept money as a Republican, as a conservative Republican, from the TEA PAC? And what's your general opinion of TEA?
Senator Overbey first.
Thank you, Stan. Well, first of all, I'm proud to stand here and say that I have been endorsed by the TEA in this election. And I think they have done that because I'm willing to stand up and let my voice be heard for our educational system as well as for our teachers. You'll recall back in 2007, and I think one of the reasons I have been granted the privilege of holding this office today is that Governor Phil Bredesen proposed changing the way our schools are funded by BEP 2.0, which cost Sevier County millions of dollars, Blount County millions of dollars, Alcoa and Maryville millions of dollars. Some people just went along with that and didn't stand up, but I stood up and opposed it and voted no on it. Now my opponent says that I'm in the hands of big unions because I voted not to end collective bargaining in this state. Well, the TEA is not the Teamsters, they're not the United Mine Workers, they're not the United Auto Workers. The TEA are populated by people that are our Sunday school teachers, that are our neighbors, that are our friends, that we go to church with, that we see on the street every day, and that teach and educate our children. And someone needs to stand up for them to assure that we have the best education system possible.
Mr. Hughes.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm a big champion of public school, especially the system here in our state. My mother was a public school system employee for 35 years. All 4 of my kids attend public school. In fact, I am the Booster Club president of my kids' elementary school in Seymour. So I would be disingenuous if I came up tonight and bashed public school, because I wouldn't do that. That's not what's in my heart. I will say, though, that in order to get up here and say that we guard the taxpayers' dollars jealously and then vote with the TEA on that union bill that would have cost us $16 million, proven fact across the state that $16 million was saved when collective bargaining was done away with. To get up here and make those 2 statements seems a little disingenuous to me. I also don't know if it's the wisest thing to come up and say that you are endorsed by the TEA. The reality is you're right, they're not the Teamsters. There's a lot of good parents, good teachers, and good students that are influenced by the TEA. But I will tell you that the NEA, the parent organization of the TEA, is the largest labor union in the United States. So to say that you're endorsed by the TEA and it's not the Teamsters, although that is true, the TEA is a portion of the largest labor union in the United States. I think in public education our focus should be singular and solely on children first. Children first. And secondarily on good teachers.
Do you have a follow-up? Do you want to respond to that, Senator Overbey?
Well, there goes Scott again. That simply is not the truth. There is a relationship between the state education associations and the NEA, but to say they're the parent is simply not correct. In fact, I know many teachers here in Sevier County and in Blount County who tell me they belong to their state association but do not belong to the national association, and the national association does not tell the state agencies what to do. So he's just simply, once again, incorrect.
Mr. Hughes.
It's going to be a long
30
night.
seconds.
It's going to be a long night. Once again, incorrect, and we just started. I will say that the TEA does fund the NEA. Money that goes into the teachers, the Tennessee Education Association, is then given up the ladder to the NEA. So to say they're not associated is simply not true.
Okay, let's move on. Question from Derek Hodges.
I'd sort of like to follow up. I don't know if I'll be allowed 2 questions in a row, but a follow-up to that. At the time when the union vote was held, I spoke to Dr. Jack Carter, the local director of schools, and he said he opposed the move. He said, we negotiate with our TEA, our local teachers union. We appreciate that. It's always worked well for us, and we don't think there should be any change to that. I guess the question is to Mr. Hughes first. Would you have recognized that? And to Senator Overbey, how did that influence your vote? Am I first?
Yes.
Absolutely, I would have had conversations with Mr. Parton. In fact, when I first announced the candidacy for this race, he was one of the first people that I went in to talk to. Sat down in his office for about an hour, and he reiterated the same thing to me, so I can verify, Derek, what you're saying is absolutely true. He had told me that he personally, in his dealings with the teachers and in negotiation with the teachers, had not had a big issue with collective bargaining. I can tell you that talking to many administrators from both of these counties, talking to Blount County officials, talking to school teachers here in Sevier County and different folks, that is not the held case amongst the majority of our constituents here, and it's not the held case across the state. Listen, we see every day and we applaud people like Scott Walker in Wisconsin, who have the courage to stand up when it may not be popular. And in Wisconsin, wasn't even the majority thing to do at the time. But we have to be men and women of courage that stand up and say the focus has to be on our kids. The focus has to be on our children. And not only that, when we can make a move in this day and age when we're talking about reducing spending and we're talking about being more frugal with our money, and we're talking about being wise stewards of our money, when we can make a move that saves taxpayers $16 million, which is what this move did. When we can make that move, and we have administrators and superintendents across the state asking us to make that move, we have to have the courage to do that.
Well, Derek, it's very important when we're facing educational issues to talk with the directors of schools. In this Senate district, there are 4 directors of schools. It's important to talk to school board members in all districts. It's important to talk to teachers, and it's important to talk to parents. So to talk to all of them is important in trying to reach a well-informed and well-reasoned decision. If I can take you back, though, into context, at the time of that vote was taken, the year before, we had just done the race to the top and put in place teacher evaluations. Earlier in that session, we had enacted, and I voted for Governor Haslam's tenure reform proposals. The proposal on collective bargaining was one that arose from the legislature, it was not part of Governor Haslam's agenda. And the teachers that I was hearing, they were saying, what more? You've already put evaluations in place. You've changed tenure. We need an opportunity to live into that before any further decisions have been made. Collective bargaining had been on the books for, I think, 28 years at that point. That hadn't ruined our educational system. In fact, nobody could establish that student outcomes were any different in systems that did collective bargaining and that didn't. So I was willing to give teachers that breath while we enacted all these other changes.
Okay, let's get a question from the audience. Education related. What's your position on proposed vouchers that would provide tax dollars to support families sending children to private school or even being homeschooled? We'll start with Senator Overbey.
Thank you, Stan, and for whoever asked that in the audience. I think we need to move very cautiously in that regard. We know that Governor Haslam has indicated he's going to propose something in that regard in the coming legislative session. And I think it's going to be important to weigh and balance that. And as I just responded with my previous answer to the previous question, it's going to be important to talk with directors of schools, school board members, teachers in the field, and parents as we weigh and measure this. I'm not prepared to make a decision on that because it's just now coming to be on the table. And I think it's going to be important to hear from a lot of folks before we make a decision. Two guiding principles, though, I don't want to take any step that would damage public education. I'm a product of our public schools. My daughters are products of our public schools. I don't want to do anything that would be harmful to our public schools. Secondly, I always want to put student achievement and student outcomes first and foremost when we analyze any of these issues.
Mr. Hughes?
I believe this is an issue that Doug and I are a little bit different on. I would agree on one point. I think that we must fight, as legislators that represent Sevier and Blount County in this district, we must fight on the BEP formula. Not only to maintain what we have, but to aggressively expand that formula, to change it so that we get the dollars that we deserve. I am, too, a big proponent of public school. Like I said when I opened, my mother, for 35 years, was an employee of the public school system, raising 4 kids, and a proud Booster Club president at the school down in Seymour where my kids attend. I also do not want to hinder public school. But the difference here between Doug and myself is that I am for school vouchers. And I'm willing to say flat out that I am. Now, how that's phased in is a process. Am I for school vouchers going statewide tomorrow? No. That has to be phased in. It has to be looked at in an intelligent way. But the reason I'm for school vouchers is because of 2 things. Number one, the big misnomer that it defunds public schools is an inaccuracy. It doesn't. In fact, if my son decided not to go to public school and I took him out to homeschool or sent him to a private school, the school that he's taken out of still gets a portion of the money allotted to him. So if you look at it from that way, it's a misnomer that it would defund public schools. But number 2, the big reason is I believe your tax dollars should follow you. Your tax dollars, you pay into the system. If you choose to homeschool your child or send them to private school, your tax dollars should follow where you make the decision for your child to go.
Senator, your question.
I'm sorry, Stan.
Do you want to answer that question? Or
Well, I think
respond to that?
you know, I think this is a very difficult issue, and it's easy to stand here tonight and make a knee-jerk reaction to it, but it's going to be very important to this state. And I don't care what my opponent says. If you take the money out of the system, it does lessen that amount of money that is in the system. We are all part of this state together. And I believe very much in the philosophy that a rising tide raises all boats. And if we can improve our educational system, improve educational outcomes, assure that more of our students graduate from high school, then all of us will be better off.
Yes.
And real briefly, just simply because it was called a knee-jerk reaction. I don't believe my response to that last question was a knee-jerk reaction. I believe that we do need to implement school vouchers, but as I stated, not statewide, not tomorrow. That would be knee-jerk. My plan and what I would propose voting for would be a school voucher program that is implemented and doing it in such a way that is an intelligent way that we can learn from, so that we don't put public schools at a disadvantage. So I don't call that a knee-jerk reaction.
I asked it of the previous candidates. The U.S. Supreme Court seemed to indicate this week that immigration is a federal issue, except with a bill, the so-called Show Me Your Papers bill, that states could enact that would allow police officers who stop people for other matters to ask for a suspected illegal immigrant's paperwork. Would you support a bill like that in the Tennessee legislature? We'll start with Mr. Hughes.
100%. No doubt. I would support it. Show me your papers. I think that it promotes public safety. I think that we have As law-abiding citizens and law enforcement in our counties, we have the authority, not only the authority, the responsibility to make sure that our citizens are taken care of, and that is checking the immigration status. Now, immigration's been an interesting topic in the candidacy debate here over the last 3 months that this race has been going on. We've been very vocal that Senator Overbey voted for driver's certificates. And he's been very vocal that no, he didn't vote for driver's licenses. Well, the reality is he's correct. He didn't vote for driver's licenses. But in 2004, when he served in the House, he did vote for driver's certificates. It's really a play on words, because a driver's certificate still is a piece of identification that lets an illegal alien drive in this state. Thankfully, since then, it's been overturned. But while it was still enacted, the New York Times put out a report that said 55,000 illegal immigrants flooded into our borders of our state because of the bill that Senator Overbey voted for to allow driver's certificates. So immigration is an interesting question. Not only the driver's certificates, but also sponsored an amendment that didn't end up passing that would have created Sevier and Blount County to become counties that would have exempted the sheriff from telling the federal officials when an illegal immigrant had been arrested. And this stated if a legal immigrant is arrested and they have to be reported to ICE agents, he sponsored an amendment that would have exempted us. So immigration is a big thing in this contest.
Senator?
Thank you, Stan. And to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, Scott, there you go again. The fact of the matter is, in the past 2 legislative years, I have voted to require Tennessee employers to use the E-Verify system to make sure that folks that apply for jobs are in this country legally. Just this past year, I voted to deny government benefits for those who are here illegally. And just this year, I supported and I believe co-sponsored a bill ensuring illegal immigrants accused in traffic fatalities stand trial, that they're not if they don't have a valid driver's license or can't prove they're here legally, they will be arrested and held for trial in that regard. Now, when it comes to the driver's license, I'm afraid my friend standing with me here just doesn't understand history. In 2001 or 2002, the governor at that time, Governor Sundquist, proposed giving those that are here illegally driver's licenses. That bill passed, but I stood on the House floor and voted against it. Unfortunately, I was in the minority in voting against it, but I was one of about 17 or 18 Republicans that had the courage to stand up and vote no. Then we had Governor Bredesen came in, who proposed doing away with that law to quit giving illegal immigrants driver's licenses, but to give them driver's certificates. And in the law it stated they could not be used for identification purposes. That was an improvement over what we had, because I voted no not to give them driver's licenses, but the General Assembly voted to do that. So to go the next step and make it driver's certificates was an improvement over where we came from. And then the first opportunity that we got a bill back to the floor to deny illegal immigrants driving permits, I voted to do away with that. That's the legislative process. It takes some time to get from point A to point B, but you get there.
Mr. Hughes, you have a response?
Following that deduction, if Hillary Clinton ran against Barack Obama, we should vote for Hillary Clinton. Because it's just better. It's one step closer. The reality is Doug Overbey did not have to vote for driver's certificates for illegal immigrants. He did not have to do it. Just because we had a bad law on the books, it doesn't mean you vote for another bad law. We have Barack Obama as president, doesn't mean we vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a little bit better than Barack Obama.
Senator?
Well, the analogy doesn't hold.
30 seconds.
The analogy doesn't hold. If we had not gone to the permits, they would still be getting driver's licenses. If you had been there and seen the debate and heard the discussion, you would know that. It wasn't a choice between nothing at all. It was whether they could keep driver's licenses or have permits. It was a step in the right direction.
Okay, let's move on. Greg Johnson has the next question.
Jobs are an important issue, maybe the issue in our country right now. In Sevier County, the average weekly wage is $557. In Blount County, it's $819 per week, and at the state level, it's $866 per week. So Sevier County is over $300 less per week per worker on average. What specifically would you do to help bring better paying jobs to Sevier County?
Senator, I think it's your turn on this one.
All right, thank you very much. Greg, I think we continue doing what we are doing. I think the best way, government doesn't create jobs, but government can certainly set the stage for job creation. I think we continue doing that by adopting balanced budgets, by continuing to cut the state budget as we've done over the past 3 years, to cut $2.5 billion out of the state budget. The less we have to take in taxes, the more money that leaves in the private sector in order to create jobs. So I think that's specifically what we need to keep doing, is to keep making our state the best place it is for job creation by keeping our taxes low, by balancing our budget and reducing our budget. Beyond that, over the past 12 years, I have worked with our local chambers of commerce, both in Blount County, Gatlinburg, Sevierville, the Pigeon Forge Hospitality Association, and I would want to continue to do that in order to create the economic base for job creation. Plus, I've got to mention the 10 Invesco program that I started in 2009 and expanded in 2010, which is creating jobs to this day. I think about 300 jobs have been created through the 10 Invesco program, which I proposed and passed under a Democratic administration.
Mr. Hughes?
I appreciate the question, because any serious discussion on our economy must start first with jobs. It has to. You often hear during debate times that the most important 3 things in a debate season are jobs, jobs, jobs. And I agree with that. Any serious discussion about the economy must start with that. I think we have to start with cutting taxes. We have to start with the Hall income tax. We say all the time that Tennessee doesn't have a state income tax, but it does when we consider that we have a Hall tax. We have to look at the food tax, the grocery tax, and we can continue to cut that, take that back. Permanently ban a state income tax, which we're working for. It'll be on the ballot hopefully here in 2014. Also, we must reduce the size of government and open up our state for business by cracking down on frivolous lawsuits. I think those 3 things, reducing size of government through cutting regulations, cracking down on frivolous lawsuits, and then the first thing, which I talked about, cutting taxes, open up our state as a more business-friendly state, and open up our counties to more business-friendly counties. I will ask a question, and I feel like the barking chihuahua at times. And the reason I feel that way is because I feel like I complain a lot. But I was in someone's office here in Sevier County, a business owner, and he said, "Scott, you're my hero. And you're my hero because you give me a choice in this election." Well, I feel like I have to be that barking person because I have to point out voting record from time to time. That's not my personality and not my nature. I would question Senator Overbey on 10 Invesco. He lauds that it has created 300 jobs. My records say 110. But regardless, 300 jobs or 110, that's $200 million spent of taxpayer money to create 300 jobs.
Time's gone. Okay, next question from Derek Hodges.
Well, I think it's important to respond because, once again, Scott,
30 seconds.
There you go again. $200 million has not been spent. It sits in a fund. About $65 million of it has been invested in small and startup businesses in this state. That's what people talk about when they want to see government do something positive, to create a fund that is there to invest in small and startup businesses, creating 300 jobs. Now, that may not be important to you, but to those 300 families, it's very important.
And I would agree. 300 jobs are important. It's important to the families that have them. 200 million or 65 million for 300 jobs. 65 million is pretty important to the taxpayers who have paid that money in.
The taxpayers didn't pay it.
Go ahead if you want to respond.
Tax credits.
Well, the taxpayers didn't pay it in. You're just being fast and loose again, as you have been.
No, taxpayers did pay it in because it creates a $65 million shortfall because there are tax credits that has to be made up for in other places. They did pay it in.
All right, we will move on to a question from Derek Hodges.
Tough ground here tonight. I was always thought that you don't bring up two things in polite company, religion and politics. I say this only to vouch that Mama tried. As a supporter of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, I, like many people across the country, was concerned when Vanderbilt University adopted a mandate that forbids campus groups from using factors like religion in choosing their leaders. Senator Overbey, Mr. Hughes has made an issue of your being the only Republican in the Senate to not vote for a bill. You were recorded as present but not voting, prohibiting that practice. Can you explain your choice? And here I intend, hopefully, just for the senator to respond. I have a question for you as well, Mr. Hughes.
Certainly, Derek, I'd be happy to. The policy that Vanderbilt adopted is not a good policy. I sit on the board of Maryville College. It's not a policy that I would have adopted for Maryville College. I do not agree with it. I would have spoken against it and voted against it if that had come up before the board of directors of Maryville College. As that bill came out of the Senate Education Committee, it applied only to public universities. That's the way it came to the floor of the Senate, and I was prepared to vote for it because the public universities are ultimately run and governed by the Tennessee General Assembly. There was an amendment that was offered on the floor of the Senate that made the bill applicable only to Vanderbilt University. In adopting that amendment, they made sure that the bill was either going to be vetoed by the governor, which it was vetoed by the governor, or been susceptible to a court constitutional challenge. In fact, the sponsor of the bill said, "I'm only presenting this to send a message to Vanderbilt." Well, there are many other and more effective ways to send a message. We shouldn't be passing legislation just to send a message. If we're going to adopt a bill on the floor, it needs to be meaningful. It needs not to be immediately subject to either veto or constitutional challenge.
All right, Mr. Hughes. Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey is tongue-tied on his name. The Tea Party's candidate for governor in 2010 has backed Senator Overbey, as has Governor Bill Haslam, apparently meaning the senator has earned bipartisan support among Republicans. You have argued both that Senator Overbey is not truly conservative and that he hasn't backed the governor's initiatives fully. Does these two men saying they want to see the senator return to Nashville hurt those arguments?
It's a hard question to answer in a minute and a half. I was not at all surprised by the governor saying that he is supporting Doug, nor was I surprised at the lieutenant governor saying that he was supporting him either. It's interesting because in the lieutenant governor's comments, at the same time that he said he was supporting Doug, he also said that there is one state senate race in the state that the incumbent has a chance to get beat. And he mentioned this one here in Sevier and Blount County. So it is not surprising to me that there would be friends of Doug's that would rally around and support him because of the closeness of this race. We have received Tea Party support from around the state, like you mentioned, Derek. We have been endorsed by the Tennessee Conservative Fund. I've met with a lot of 912 groups and Tea Parties across the state. I was just in Nashville last Thursday for a fundraiser from a lot of Tea Party folks. There is a genuine concern of the voting record of our state senator. And the general consensus around the state is how in the world can a conservative county like Sevier County and a conservative county like Blount County continue to elect someone to represent them that does not uphold their conservative values. And this is pure voting record. It's nothing personal between those people and Doug, and this race is not anything personal between Doug and myself. But a lot of people are questioning why a senator who has the voting record the way he does can represent a conservative county of Sevier and Blount County. So was I surprised? No. Does it hurt our chances? No, I don't think so. The governor endorsed Romney. Santorum won Sevier and Blount County.
If I could ask you a question, Mr. Hughes, you seem to feel that every vote a legislator or even a member of Congress takes should be taken pragmatically as a vote for or against something, and you don't seem to allow for the possibility that votes are taken for procedural reasons, for supporting other legislators in exchange for their support. Do you allow that could explain some of Senator Overbey's votes that appear not to be conservative?
I understand the process, Stan. I understand I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I understand that if I vote for your bill, then tomorrow when my bill comes up that I'll vote for yours. But I cannot bend on things like immigration. I cannot bend on things like teaching homosexuality to kids in our K through 8th grade education system. I cannot bend on labor unions. I cannot bend on term limits. I cannot bend on some of these things. So yes, there are opportunities and there are times when things happen in the process, and I understand that. And with 12 years of a voting history to look at from Doug, I understand that there will be going to be things that he could explain his way out of. But you can't explain your way out of don't teach gay and not voting for that. You can't explain your way out of immigration, and you sure as heck can't explain your way out of voting for unions.
Senator.
You know, Stan, I think the best answer to these outlandish and ridiculous statements comes directly from my wife, Kay, who says, Doug, if you were any more conservative, you'd stop breathing. I'd be conserving air. The fact of the matter is, I'm a proud East Tennessee conservative. I have a 100% voting record, pro-life voting record. I have a 100% voting record with the NRA. I have voted to cut $2.5 billion out of the budget. I have voted to eliminate the gift tax. I have voted to put us on the road to eliminating the inheritance tax. Just last year we voted to reduce the hall tax. I have voted to reduce the sales tax. If that ain't conservative, you tell me what is.
All right. Next question will be from me. Senator, you supported a bill that pushed up the date for the next Pigeon Forge liquor referendum by 6 months. Why did you do that? And Mr. Hughes, would you have done the same thing? We'll start with Senator Overbey.
Thank you, Stan. Here's the reason I did it. Because the request came by a 2/3 majority vote from the Pigeon Forge City Commission. The idea was put forth to me about a year ago to sponsor, I was asked to sponsor a bill to give premier resort status to a segment of Pigeon Forge. That request was made shortly after the city of Pigeon Forge had voted down liquor by the drink. Premier resort status would have put liquor by the drink there. I told the folks that I would not carry a bill, I would not support a bill, and I would actively speak against a bill that would seek to give premier resort status to a section of Pigeon Forge and override the will of the citizens of Pigeon Forge spoken through the referendum. But I did say that if the city fathers of Pigeon Forge found that the circumstances had changed during the course of the year and would by 2/3 vote request an early election, then I would support that legislation. And I did support and vote in favor of that legislation because it came with a 2/3 request by the body that is closest to the people. But I consistently refused to support anything that would have given any special privilege to a certain geographic area within Pigeon Forge and override the will of the people as established by their vote in a referendum.
Mr. Hughes?
This is a big issue. It's a bigger issue than most of us in Sevier County realize. You know, I live down the road in Seymour, about 15 minutes away. I don't live inside the city limits of Pigeon Forge. So I didn't get a vote the last 2 times liquor by the drink came up. But I can tell you I was greatly disappointed when I saw Doug and how he voted. Because it is an issue. I was knocking on doors in Pigeon Forge today, and a man came to the door and he said, Scott, who you running against? And I said, Doug Overbey. He said, I'd never vote for that guy because he's taken away my rights to vote. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it's the whole Pigeon Forge liquor thing. We voted on it twice. It shouldn't come up until next year. It's a big issue.
You want to respond?
Thank you, Stan. The fact of the matter is, many issues get sent to the General Assembly by local governments. And in this instance, the City of Pigeon Forge City Commission held a public meeting and adopted a resolution because of the circumstances in Pigeon Forge, satisfactory to them, that they had a significant economic development opportunity, ask for an early referendum, one that can be held when another election is already scheduled without any cost to the city of Pigeon Forge. It has been our practice that when a local government makes a request by a 2/3 majority vote, to try to honor that request because they're the level of government closest to the people.
And that's a nice way to respond. It's a nice way to put it. The reality is there's about 1,200 voters in Pigeon Forge. 5 of them, which are the people that serve on the city council, passed a resolution, which 4 of them voted for, that went before Doug and the 132 folks that serve in the legislature and said, please change this bill. 1,200 people voted on this, and it got voted down by a majority 2 different times. If we would have waited till 2013, it would have cost the taxpayers no more money. It was coming up on the ballot anyway in 2013. We moved it because of special interest and 4 people. And when we did that, we're taking away our freedoms.
We have time for one more question, and I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to offer each of you candidates a chance to ask the other candidate any question you want to ask him. And we will ask Mr. Hughes to ask Senator Overbey a question.
One, right?
One.
I want to stay with liquor for a minute. And the reason I do is not because I'm a teetotaler person, and it's not because I voted in Pigeon Forge a certain way. I live in Seymour, like I've said over and over and over again. As I went door to door, I just have heard over and over and over again from people that would discount the last story that Doug told, which the story was that he had nothing to do with the private act of trying to get liquor passed in a special section in Pigeon Forge. In fact, the story I've heard over and over again, it becomes the worst kept secret in Sevier County almost, is that Ryan Haynes, the representative in Farragut, was the man who carried the private act, ended up not getting voted on. But Ryan Haynes was approached, and in meetings where Doug, the conversations took place.
What is the question?
Please carry this private act. The question is, once and for all, I want you to say and tell us, did you or did you not have anything to do with the private act to try to get liquor in Pigeon Forge?
Scott, I consistently, despite being asked numerous times to either carry or support legislation to grant premier resort status to a certain geographic area of Pigeon Forge, I was asked to do that, and I consistently refused to do it, said I would not carry it,
Sure.
said I would not sponsor it, said I would actively oppose it and would vote against it. But that's the absolute truth, Scott. And I don't care what you've heard, and I don't care what innuendo you're trying to raise. But I did not do that, would not do it, have never done it.
Okay,
and I take deep umbrage at your trying to insinuate otherwise.
That wasn't the question.
Now maybe we ought to go back to Ronald Reagan's 11th Amendment, that we don't say anything bad about a fellow Republican. I'm prepared to stand on that. Are you?
That wasn't the question, Stan.
That's my question to you. Are you prepared to adhere to Ronald Reagan's 11th Amendment or 11th Commandment to say nothing bad about a fellow Republican? I'm prepared to stand on that. Are you?
I will answer that question. Can I get my question answered first?
You can answer his.
Can I?
He's responded to yours. If it's not to
Sure.
your satisfaction.
No problem. I will answer that question. I'd like it to go on the record that he never answered my question about did he ever approach a different legislator to carry it. Here's
No,
the
I
answer.
never approached another legislator,
The
Scott.
answer to my question, will I speak negative of another Republican? Listen, this has never been a personal battle. This has never been a personal vendetta. It's strict voting record. It's voting record. So will I point out voting record of a fellow Republican? Absolutely, I'll point out voting record of a fellow Republican. Will I go around and talk negative about Doug? Absolutely not. That's not who I am. But will I point out voting record? Yes.
That's it. That's the debate. Let's give them a hand, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all for coming. Glad you were here with us tonight, and we appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you again in the future at Republican Party meetings. Thank you.